Here's a question I got asked this week by a candidate, which is a simple question, really, and a lot of candidates do ask me this. Should you leave a job to go and look for a job? Because finding a job, according to a lot of people, is a full time job. And that answer is actually dependent upon where you sit in your kind of world at this moment in time. And I will explain. One of the things about job hunting that becomes very clear to a lot of candidates is if you are in a position in your career that is, how can I put it, a little mixed. You've got some nuances of experience, you're not quite there yet. A lot of salespeople go through this as well. They struggle to find certain places or certain jobs to go through. And it isn't until you get around about 5 to 10 years experience when you start finding your kind of groove. You start finding your track in which you can then start applying for jobs in those areas. And you become very sought after in that kind of frame. People say 2 plus years. Again, it's dependent on the sector you're working in. It's about shaking through the fact that you don't need as much training, which to a company suggests that you are going to cost less to train, basically. And that's great for a company. Less hours training you means you're going to hit the ground running more or less better. And that's kind of what the market tends to be looking for, is those nuanced candidates where they are exactly the job spec or close enough to the job spec where you don't require too much training. These are like the unicorns of the jobs world. Hits the salary and round about the mark in which they can afford to pay that particular person, and then also is available within reason immediate. But obviously we have 4 to 3 months, 4 weeks to 3 months of notice period most people have, which I'll come back to that in a second. So if you kind of fit that criteria for a candidate, then I think, and this is just my gut feeling, you're going to you're going to find yourself interviewed more and probably get a job offer quicker than someone with less experience than that. Now, I'm not saying that everyone this works with. Where I would say about 50 to 60% of the marketplace that doesn't quite fit neatly into the job market per se, being out of work can actually be a negative towards yourself. Whereas you are seen as basically a part of what the job market is. That you don't stand out from everything else unless you've got very unique skills that they're looking for. So you will be against that burden of it's going to cost them money to train you. Um, Salary is going to be ticking the box. You're probably going to need less salary than the person that's really experienced. So that's where they could play off, and that's where you could play off in that sense. But then you're available immediately, which is great. But also that asks questions at the same time. Why are you immediately available? And that also goes to the experienced person. Why are you out of work? You're extremely experienced, exactly what we were looking for. Why are you immediately available? And then you go down the route of job hunting's a full-time job. I left the last job because I felt it's time for me to move on, and I thought I'd spend the time finding the right job in the next move. That's why you're immediately available. If you're unemployed because you were let go in the last role, redundant, or you're out of you've just come into the market and stuff, that's a tougher sell for you to convince people to take you on. So coming back to the question, should you leave a job to look for a job? And again, it is that nuanced. It is that kind of, you've got to assess yourself and realize, actually, I'm quite sought after. The market really wants me. So I could spend some time. I've got a bit of money to one side. I've got some time, and off I go. I would highly recommend that people stay in a job. Jobs beget jobs. This is my 19 years of experience in the recruitment world. If you're in a job, you've got a better chance of getting another job. Sad fact. If you're out of a job, you've got it's against you. You've got about 50-60% chance of getting the next job. And it's as hard as that. Which I'll talk about in other videos. I do talk. My last video I did was about people which have been out of work for so long and still struggling to find a job and where it's going wrong. Have a little look at that video. That was the last video I done where it's you're not getting any responses from your job applications. But this is more around if you leave a job to look for another job. And I would come in again, circling back to where I was just a minute ago. It's nuanced. It depends upon your skills and experience. But there's another area as well, which I want to kind of just touch upon as well. It depends upon the economy as well. Now, when you're in a candidate-driven economy, in other words, there's plenty of jobs, but there's very little candidates, then you're in a power position in most of the situations. So even if you're quite junior, or even if you're quite senior in your role, you're in a power position where companies will hire you because you are relevant to that market and there's plenty of jobs for you to go after because there's lack of other candidates in the marketplace. The market's shifting at the moment. We're January 2024. The market shifted. Last year it was the complete opposite. This year we're seeing a reduction of vacancies. I think it's somewhere in the region of about 25% less than it was this time last year, which tells me that it's now shifting towards an employer-based market, or maybe central, maybe neutral, which is going to make it very difficult for people which are out of work, but also if you leave a job to go for another job, you might find the market might come against you at the wrong time. So that's why I highly recommend that you stay in the job for as long as you possibly can. It doesn't help, I understand, because interviews, you want to go and see someone tomorrow and you have to book a day off if you're working for someone. That's the only negativity part of it. Maybe be prepared to take interviews in the evenings, and I've seen interviews on weekends happening as well, or try to get your first touch base interview with a company or a recruiter or whoever's doing it as a Teams meeting, and you can do that in your car on your lunch break on your phone these days, which is a great thing about technology. So I hope I answered that question, really. I've been very uncertain for years about it, and it's taken me some time to kind of get my head around who and when and why. And I come across many candidates that do it and many that don't. And the ones which get a job confidently from the back of that tend to be the people that have the sought after skills, the most needed experience in the marketplace. Everyone else will struggle a little bit to find a job. But I'm not saying you would never find a job. You will, with some persistence. Thank you for listening.